Welcome to the 1 Million Years of Joy podcast. I'm Dr. Andrea Benaker, your host, and my intention is to inspire you to find more joy in your life through the stories from our guests and the science on joy and purpose. Guido, welcome. It's such a pleasure to have you with us today.
Good evening and nice to see you again, Andrea. I'm very pleased we have this opportunity to exchange ideas.
Likewise, Guido. Your career has been incredibly diverse, from serving as a senior corporate executive to becoming a prominent professor in leadership at HEC Paris in Qatar. Can you share with us the pivotal moments that influenced your transition from the corporate world to academia?
With pleasure, Andrea. The first over 25 years of my life have been, as you know, in the corporate or in the United Nations environment. I was a senior executive and I was enjoying my work, but there was a moment which changed in many ways my life. And this was when I was 36. I was working at that time with the World Bank, and I had the privilege to be sent by the World Bank to the Harvard Advanced Management Program. And here I was for the first time sitting in the Harvard classrooms, observing the dynamic. And I really thought, oh my God, this is extraordinary. This is something exceptionally interesting. And I discovered at age 36 that I wanted to be on the other side of the classroom, and my real passion was actually teaching. But of course, I was not ready for it. I was young. I had financial needs. I didn't have a PhD, but I had that in that very moment the clear feeling that that was my path to professional fulfillment and something I wanted to do in a professional manner um, in the last 10 years of my life. So from that moment on, I started preparing for it, right? I did my PhD in my 40s. And when I finished my PhD, I started teaching part-time. I still was holding a senior leadership role in the business environment, but I started delivering different programs at different universities. And when I was ready, I made the move, right? So I made the move in my early 50s. It was very late. It was definitely a very different career path as compared to the traditional academic journey. And I joined full-time education initially with Nanyang Technological University, NTU, which is one of the leading universities and business schools in Asia. And 3 years ago, I moved from Singapore to HEC Paris. And if you ask me the reason why I did it, it was because I realized that at a point in time, as a corporate executive, you work on things, right? While as a professor, you work on people. So at a point in time, it's great to think that you are able to leave something behind. You are able to contribute to the community, to the new generations by helping them to develop as leaders and as human beings. So this is what has moved me from corporate to education.
Thank you for sharing. And with your extensive experience in leadership and cultural intelligence, what role do you believe joy plays in fostering effective leadership?
Joy is, by the way, it's a very, very important and very good question. Joy is something we don't talk too much about, right? We start talking more about joy now in the recent years, but for many, many decades, the focus was on success, was on career growth, was on results, was on financial development. There were many, many other things that seemed to be more important than joy. Joy is very, very important. It's important because it gives a sense to your life. It helps you to connect to others, to build bridges, to build rapport. Joy is something you can convey is something that you can share, is something that you can use to motivate, energize others. And ultimately, life is very short. We need to take advantage of every minute. So joy is important, an important component of our life. You realize, I believe very firmly that you realize the importance of joy with when times goes by. You realize that time is not an unlimited resource. Time is precious. And then you start asking yourself, what's the point? How can I make the remaining part of my journey meaningful, rich, energizing, inspiring, exciting, and pleasant? All ideas and concepts which are correlated to joy, of course.
And when we're looking at some of the studies on a global scale, engagement is very low, and there's also a lack of joy within organizations around the world. Given your expertise, what concrete actions do you believe leaders can take to change those statistics?
Yeah, you're touching a very, very important point, right? All stats, all studies tell us that, particularly the new generations, millennials, and even more so Generation Z, are fundamentally unhappy at work, are struggling to find a sense of purpose, fulfillment. I was reading a few days ago a study that suggests 78% of Generation Z are planning to leave their jobs this year within the next 12 months, which is staggering, right? Which is a very intriguing element. So, why is that? I believe it's a combination of factors. There are clearly environmental factors. Organizations are moving very fast. Um, Individuals, and particularly Generation Z, are increasingly aware of that the relationship with their employer is most of the time purely transactional. On the other hand, you have probably an increasing level of impatience from the new generations. There is an expectation that everything should happen now. Rewards should come fast. Career development should be fast. Everything is easy and fast. And the model that the social media conveys, a model of happy, beautiful, and amazing people that is, of course, at odds with the reality of every day. So there is a sense of frustration in many young professionals and people in general when they compare the reality of their life with the dream, with the message that they receive from social media, and that, of course, increase the sense of frustration. So it's a very complex theme, but I agree with you that if you visit most organizations today, you find a lot of frustration, a lot of difficulties and struggles and pain, and not too much joy.
And are there specific actions that you would have for leaders in terms of shifting that reality and bringing more joy within their teams?
I think when we look at what we can do, there are several things. Of course, leaders have an important role. We focus more and more on the idea of servant leaders as compared to transactional leaders of the past or even transformational leaders. Servant leaders are seen as coaches and mentors and people who focus on the development of their subordinates and encourage them and offer them opportunities and all that. That's definitely important. The leader, the boss, the head of the team has a very important role to play. Education has an important role to play. Whether it's school or universities, can play an important role in preparing the new generations to a world which is very complex, very challenging. And last but not least, families. Parents have an important role. And while we all tend to focus on bosses and schools and education, I think we sometimes forget the importance of families. There's a lot of work to do when it comes to the ability of parents to generate and to create environment which are positive and for their kids, to prepare them to the reality of life, to make them able to appreciate the moment, to understand that life is short, to navigate in the complex world of social media and information. So this is the triangle, right? We should look at, and everybody has to play its part. Because if we don't, we will be confronted to a new generation of people who are deeply frustrated, unable to stay in a job for more than 9 months, running after fantasies, constantly frustrated by the gap between the dream and the reality, and fundamentally unhappy of who they are, of their life, of their relationships. So it's an important areas of work for all of us: education, businesses, society, government, in the broader definition.
And in a world that often emphasizes titles, achievements, success, how do you define true fulfillment in life?
I consider myself lucky because I found my my demon, right? The ancient Greeks were used to say that in order to be happy in your life, you have to find your demon, right? Your demon is fundamentally what you really like to do and what at the same time you are good at doing. I think I found my demon. My demon is teaching. I am firmly convinced that teaching is, for me at least, the most exciting, the most rewarding job in the world. So professionally, I found my demon. Of course, life is not all about what you do, but it's about your family, it's about your relationships, it's about the people around you, it's about your leadership legacy. Um, but if you are fundamentally happy with what you do and with who you are, then the rest will follow. Building a relationship with a partner who is solid and meaningful will come. Growing kids who are happy to be there and ready for life will be easier. So I think everything starts from this Greek say that happiness and joy start with finding your demon. Unfortunately, for many people, finding their demon, you probably have found your demon, but for many people, it is very difficult, right? And I'm not only referring to people whose career is not particularly impressive or interesting, but also for people who who are considered to be quite successful, right? In my job, I often meet CEOs who are in their early 50s who come to me and tell me, look, CEOs who work in the banking area, in financial sector, in the big four, who tell me, Guido, I made money. I consider to be successful by all standards, right? Career, financially, and so on. I'm not happy. I want to do something else. I want to teach. I want to become a coach. I want to write a book, but I want to do something different, right? So the idea of finding your demon, what you really like to do, is not only something that applies to the white collar, the clerk who is confined in a narrow job with very little satisfaction, but it may be a problem for the CEOs, for board members, for very senior leaders who who are successfully financially and in terms of their title and position, but they are not happy of what they do.
I really love everything that you have shared, and you call it finding your demon. I call it finding your purpose. And one of the key insights that has emerged for me personally, as a result, also an inspiration from a great friend, his name is Amar, who wrote a book called Purposehood. It was that when we found our purpose, it's not just about having an altruistic purpose, but also balancing it with something that is selfish. And actually, when we live our purpose and we understand this duality of both being selfish and altruistic, this is where we can tap into pure joy. I was curious to
Absolutely.
get your views on that.
I mean, my views are simple. I completely agree. In the Greek perspective of life and happiness, finding your demon doesn't only mean doing something that is good for the society and for the environment and for the people, for your family, for your group, for your community, but it's also about finding something that you enjoy personally, you are good at, and you can make a living from. Oh, right? So there are these four circles, right? What you like, what you are good at, what can give you what you need to live, and what is good for society. Um, and these four circles are what I would define as the pillars, right, for living an interesting and fulfilling professional but also personal life. So I agree with you. I just wanted to add maybe one, or two thoughts to what you were saying before.
Thank you. And do you believe actually that leaders should facilitate the process of helping the younger generation and all their employees to actually seek and find their purpose or their demons, as you call it?
Yes, I believe that we, as a leader, we should look with an open mind and in a way open heart to the very definition of servant leadership. And it is important that we understand that if we support our team, if we facilitate things, if we are coaches, mentors, and role models for them, they will be not only more happy, but also more productive, more effective, more successful. So that this is something that it's important. However, with all this being said, the role of leaders is sometimes difficult, right? The role of leaders is achieving success, first of all, for the organization. And that requires sometimes the ability to take tough decisions, even when these decisions are unpopular, to balance happiness with result, to navigate through uncertain times, to be sometimes autocratic when it's about closing a business, taking tough decisions, saving the company, cutting costs, right? So, yes, being a servant leader is definitely positive. We should probably try very hard to operate in that framework, being at the same time aware that sometimes we need to bite the bullet, we need to be tough, and we need to take decisions which do not make us necessarily most popular person around, but are needed to save the company, to protect the bigger good, and somehow to help your group to survive in difficult circumstances. So it's a balance, of course, as everything in life, right?
Okay. And Guido, you have lived and worked in so many countries. You mentioned, of course, Qatar, Singapore, but you've also lived in Switzerland, in Italy, India, Cuba, the US. I was curious to get your views given your immersion in these different cultures. I have two questions for you. My first question is, what have you learned about joy across all these cultures, and how has it shaped your view on life?
Look, it's another interesting question. I was reflecting the other day, not only about where I've been living, but also where I've been teaching. I've been teaching in over 30 countries, including places such as North Korea and others, not so usual locations, right? What I learned is that joy is not necessarily a result of high income and perfect social and political conditions. I found genuine joy in my students in Pyongyang, North Korea, in La Habana, Cuba, some of the most politically of the most, how to say, autocratic, right? Systems where there is very, very little space for personal decisions, where the constraints, the boundaries, the obligations are very heavy, incredibly heavier than in countries such as the Nordics, for example. And yet, you can find joy in this environment. So the question is, What's the difference between the idea of happiness that you find sometimes in the World Economic Statistic, where you see Finland number one and Sweden number two, versus the what Bhutan calls the gross national happiness, which is a combination of family settings, cultural heritage, philosophical frameworks, and so on and so forth. So I don't have a magic, perfect academic definition for what produced joy. Of course, the economic conditions help. Of course, the political freedoms, right, help. Of course, the quality of teaching, the per capita income help, but they're not enough, right? And you need more than that. You need philosophical frameworks, cultural backgrounds that help. You need family settings. You need the sense of a community. You need education systems that are focusing on the right priorities, on the right values, and so on. So again, I'm not giving you a clear answer, but this is what I learned in my 60 years journey around the world.
This brings me to my second question about these cultural experiences. Have they shaped in any way your approach to leadership in both your own career and how you teach others today?
Of course, of course. If you travel and if you live with others, with other cultures, if you work with them, if you share food with them, if you share your life with them, you understand that the very definition of leadership depends, right? Is somehow deeply influenced by the culture of the country. What will be defined great leadership behaviors in Montreal will be considered as something or refined, right? In Singapore or in Beijing or in Pyongyang and vice versa, right? So if you travel the world, you need to stay open, and you need, every time you move, every time you meet somebody with a different mental programming, you need to challenge your own definition of leadership and be completely open to work in very different ways and lead in very different ways depending on the country where you are sitting. Even the definition, which is so popular among Generation Z and young millennials and in the West, of servant leaders, is not necessarily popular or easy to explain in the Gulf, right? Or in Asia, for what it means. So, tremendous differences. But there is something that which is connected to the ability to enjoy the moment and to be able to be happy, which is for all of us, having gone through our challenges, having been tested, having had the necessity to fight and survive. This gives you a totally different appreciation of who you are, of time, of life, as compared to being a spoiled person who would never encounter any major challenge in their life, right? So I think if your experience is very inspiring in a way, because you've gone through a very difficult journey, you have emerged, and you have been able to continue your life. And I have the feeling that this has, in a way, in many ways, helped you to appreciate what you have today deeply. And I think this is a common rule, right? What I'm worried about the new generation is that, particularly those who come from affluent families, is the fact that these kids are brought to the start of their professional life, having lived in Disneyland, in a Disneyland world, right? With no tests, no real challenges, no military service, nothing that test them, push them, make their life difficult, create questions, force them to work hard, to study hard, to work and study, to basically go through pain, challenges fundamental question about their ability to survive and make it. Now, if you start life without any scar, without any previous challenge, um, you face the risk of being very vulnerable because life is not Disneyland, is not a bed of roses. So the ability to appreciate the moment, right? The simple things that life gives us, a wonderful landscape, right? A dinner with your family, a moment shared with all good friends, right? A trip in a country which is fascinating. I mean, the opportunities to be happy, to enjoy life. Well, these opportunities can be appreciated only if you fully understand their importance. If you fully understand that these moments are precious, that these moments are unique, that this give us this gives taste to our journey. And if everything has been easy and you had no challenge of any kind before entering the big colosseum of life, right? The arena, and then the risk of being very vulnerable and the risk of suddenly experiencing the disconnect between the dream and the reality is very high. I'm not sure I've been totally clear with this, but that's the point is some challenges can help you to find joy in whatever good moments life gives us.
So, if you could go back in time and give your younger self one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
Yeah, fundamentally, two things. One is being more patient than I've been. When I was younger, to put it mildly, patience was not my, my strength, right? And the second, and probably much more important, is to spend more time with my daughters. I had my daughters when I was quite young, and in that period of my life, career was important, right? I was reasonably successful. I was traveling the world. So I told myself, well, I will recover later, right? When they will be teenagers and when we will have more meaningful conversation and later on in life. Also, because of the work I do, my studies, my research, I realized that almost everything, as Freud was saying, everything happens before 6 or before 10, right? That most important things, our personality, our culture, a number of attitudes are actually shaped by the experiences we have before we are 10 or 12, right? Before puberty. And I was not there. I was not often there when my daughters needed me before puberty. And if I could go back, I would do things very differently. I apologize with both of them. I think they understood. I'm trying to recover now. But I'm afraid it's a bit too late. So this is something I will do differently. And this is something I share with my participant, with my students. When I talk about how personality is shaped, how culture is shaped, I insist with them. And I talk particularly to the men, particularly here in the Gulf, in Qatar, in Saudi Arabia. I tell the fathers, remember, you have 10 years to
Mm.
make a difference. You have 10 years to establish rapport. If you think you will build rapport with your kids when they are teenagers, forget it. The plane has left, right? Even if some of the interaction you can have with small kids are not necessarily inspiring because they are simple conversations, they are very, very important. And this is something I will do different. And this is something I stress very passionately with my students. Some of them don't care, don't hear it, but many of them do. And they come back and they tell me, yesterday night I did my neo personality test with my husband or with my wife, and then I talked to my daughters, and I'm planning to bring her out for dinner alone tomorrow. She's 6. So I hope that I'm leaving a few seats, right? That's my leadership legacy, Andrea.
Beautiful. And I agree with you so much. And when I'm thinking about my own kids, and it's really about, yes, being present, being there for them through the highs and the lows, and also sharing beautiful experiences with them. And that's really where they learn, they grow. And particularly, as you were mentioning earlier, in my case, what I've noticed is that whenever we're able as a family to travel and also discover new cultures and new perspectives about the world and the challenges that others go through. For example, I remember we brought the kids in Brazil when they were much, much younger. And as you were saying earlier, you could have said, wow, they're living in this, golden castle. And all of a sudden, they're having a very, very different perspective about how others live outside of our own environment. So I think that's tremendously enriching, and it's a gift that we can give to kids if possible beyond our time. So that's been my experience, just to expand on what you were sharing. So if we're thinking now about creating a more joyful world, what do you think we need to do collectively as parents, as leaders, as individuals?
Great question. I don't have a simple answer because there are many pieces, as I was saying before, right? Um, and sometimes the philosophical framework in which we operate, right, is not helping us. And when I talk about the philosophical framework, I looking at the Western side of the world, I specifically have um, the Christian heritage in mind, right? What is peculiar in the Christian heritage is that's moved the focus from now to the future, right? The past is the scene, the present is forgiveness, and the future is happiness. So we all, whether we are believers or not, we all tend to be influenced by this philosophical framework. So we tend to look at the future. But the reality is that life is now, right? And we need to um, work together to make the now a better place. Right? And yes, the future is important. Yes, we all have to be conscious that we need to plan and to look ahead, but at the same time having this ability to enjoy every minute, right? Which obviously is philosophically something difficult to do for those of us who are, they like it or not, who are strongly influenced by the Christian heritage.
Hmm.
Um, with this being said, then of course every actor has to play a different role. In business school, we need to prepare leaders who are not only effective and competent, but who have integrity, who have wisdom, who are servant leaders in many ways. Humility, integrity, and competence is not only about competency, right? Humility, integrity are equally important. For the government to build an education system that is solid enough, both in terms of means and cultural framework. When you see countries that invest in their education system 1.5% of their PIL, or that pay their teachers less than call centers operators,
Hmm.
there is a problem there, right? There is a problem there because we need the best people we have in the schools, right? People are truly capable, truly committed, go to teach because they have something to share. And as families, there is a lot of work we need to do, Andrea. We need to educate. We need to educate the families, the parents, and prepare them for their difficult job. And this can be done in different ways, but I'm not sure that we invest enough time and resources in preparing couples to raise kids. So if we work at these three levels, academia, government, and business, and, and, and the education system and families, then I think we will be able to make some progress.
All right. Well, on those wise words, Guido, it's been an immense pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank
And I
you
look
very
forward to
much.
connecting soon.
Thank you, Andrea, for having invited me.